Hello and welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography. Today we are speaking with Kim Holden. She is a multifaceted professional whose career bridges the realms of architecture and maternal health. As a founding principal of Shop Architects, she played a pivotal role in shaping the firm's growth and culture over 2 decades. Her personal experiences with childbirth, supported by a midwife and doula, profoundly influenced her perspective on the importance of environment and support during labor. This led her to establish Doula Design, a practice that integrates her architectural expertise with her passion for improving birth experiences. Through this venture, she focused on how the design of birth spaces can impact outcomes, aiming to create environments that prioritize the needs and comfort of birthing individuals. Kim is also a certified advanced birth doula and a lactation counselor, and she continues to advocate for maternal health through education and design. Please welcome Kim Holden. Why don't you tell us who you are from your perspective, a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you're at?
I'm an architect, a birth and postpartum doula, and a certified lactation counselor. My work is focused on the intersection of birth and design and the impact that environment has on experiences, outcomes, racial disparities, and maternal mortality. That's sort of the elevator pitch, but how did I get here? So I am an architect, and I practiced as an architect for 25 years. I was a founding partner at Shop Architects in New York. And while I was growing the firm, I was also growing my family, and I had a midwife and a birth doula for both of my births.
Now, how did you get to the point of choosing that outside of the normal and rational thing that everyone chooses? To do this is outside of the norm, especially if you do it at home. From my experience of coming into contact with it, and we had both of our kids at home, as I told you, and for a father, not knowing that this is really still a thing that's done, you immediately like, safety, what's going on? And I was scared to death. Now, after having gone through it, it's the most bonding and beautiful way to go through it. But I will also admit that if there were complications and something bad happened, I would feel deeply guilty. So I don't know how to handle that reality and how much value exchange there is by, have your baby in the hospital where they may be more likely to channel you into a C-section and give you MRSA just for being in, or have it at home and maybe your baby dies because you're too far from there's negatives everywhere. But there's a rational and good choice. I've gone through the experience, and I would say if you can do a birth in the hospital, this is just my opinion from going through the experience. I would say that if you can do a birth in the hospital with a doula in an environment that's meant for that, but if something horribly wrong happens, you can immediately be right there where you need all the help. That's kind of my take on it. My wife would be very upset to hear that I'm giving that advice because she, I think, and we'll have her in some time to talk for herself, but I would think she'd be more so, nope, at home, yada, yada, yada. What's from your opinion, much more informed than my own, I would imagine. What's a better way to think about that rather than kind of my fear-based reasoning about how I approach it?
Yes. So I'm glad you brought this up because I get asked this question quite a bit, or a series of questions like that, because there's a lot of fear around birth.
Sure.
I think the bottom line is that it's a very serious thing, and whatever your birth experience is, it stays with you forever, whether it's positive or negative or somewhere in between. What I would
Ours
say,
were very positive.
That's good, and mine were as well. As challenging as they were, I felt supported, relaxed, calm. I had also been very educated throughout the process of working with a doula during my pregnancy, so that I had the knowledge that I needed to navigate different situations, to advocate for myself, to navigate this medicalized system that we have. So what I would say, just to sort of pull it back for a moment, is that the midwifery and birth center model of care sees birth as a normal process that occasionally needs intervention versus medicalized birth, which is seen by OBs as a condition to be managed. And those are, you couldn't get more different. And so the way that hospital labor and delivery rooms are designed are pretty much not that much different than any other hospital room.
It's an operating room.
It's an operating room. And so the birth center model of care and midwifery model of care really centers the patient and the family, the birthing person and the family, versus a hospital setting, which centers the provider. So, birth center, you have the bed is often not the center of the room. It looks more like perhaps a yoga studio where you've got exercise balls and peanut balls and yoga silks and slings and anything to encourage and promote and facilitate movement and change of position, because ultimately so it's understanding the anatomy and physiology of birth. So when I talk about education and awareness, that's really what it is. So why is it important to move during labor? Why is it important to have change of position? Why is it important to be in an environment where you feel safe and calm? It's because it promotes the hormones of birth, which it's basically oxytocin, which is the love hormone. So what gets the baby in, gets the baby out. And oftentimes, hospitals and labor and delivery, they make people feel anxious. They're scary. They're loud. You can't control the light. It's very clinical. So, yeah. So I hope does that answer?
Oh yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
I mean, our I had a very good point. I always get good points, and they get birthed before I can birth them in the proper way. But yeah, so we did ours at home. We were going to do the tub in the dining room, which my wife appreciated the color of the dining room, I believe, at the time. And it was
matters.
a smaller room.
That's part of environment.
100%. She loved it. Was chamois was the color, and it was like a yellow with a tinge of orange in it. But she wanted to paint everything. Then I was like, let's go with the dining room. But in there, in the tub, great experience. But it was our first kid was a pretty long birth, and I think she went into labor the night before, and it wasn't till like 7 or something the next morning. So she was incredibly worn out. She was kind of delirious, but our midwife was just the most, Stirwalt, whatever. I mean, she was just calm rock of, like, it's going to be all right. We're here. And if anything is wrong, we're doing this. So it's, just folk. It was really, really good. Her and her team, amazing. And then with our second child, I don't know how common this is, but the labor time was just all of a sudden 1/10. And like at 11 o'clock, Braxton Hicks, whatever that's called, if I'm getting that.
Practice labor.
Yeah. And within something like an hour or 45, it wasn't long. Like we had the next kid. And like we had family visiting. And as soon as she went into Braxton Hicks, she was like, all right, kids coming. You guys have to go to your, predetermined place where you're going to spend the night, because they were visiting for Thanksgiving. Our second one came around Thanksgiving. So I have a hard time remembering the date he was born, because it was the day before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Which is different every year. Right.
But it was the 24th. I know that now.
Okay.
But so they get in the car and they're going up to Brunswick from Biddeford, which is only a 45-minute drive. We had the kid, Grayson, before they got to where they were going. So it's like, hey, you guys there yet?
Wow.
Yeah. And he came out across almost.
So you've had 2 home births, so you know what it's like to be in your environment where you feel comfortable, calm.
I can't imagine how hard it would be to feel safe, calm, and and that there is a value to that. I don't know how much it is, because I've only experienced that, but it was very, very calm and bonding to be in your home with your wife, with your baby together, not somewhere getting shots and buzzers and alarms and in cold clinical sheets and beds. And for someone who's sensitive to an environment like me, as a designer too, you get that, you pick up on that. And if you've got a natural interest in birth, why not combine the two? So how do you now work as a design consultant specifically in these things?
I do. Yes, I do a little bit of everything. So yes, I do design consulting work. I do doula work, mostly virtual now, just because I need the flexibility. And COVID really changed the nature of what doulas do, and really front-ended education prenatally, even more so, because we were educating clients not only on potential birth scenarios, but COVID scenarios. I had clients who would show up at the hospital and their husband or partner, whomever wasn't allowed up because they were either showing signs of COVID or whatever. So it was very scary. But yes, and so I do, a project now for the Motherhood Center in New York. It's a postpartum day hospital, just helping them with space planning. They have to move and
Postmortem is way too close to mortem.
postpartum.
I know,
yes.
but in my non-medical head, I'm like, huh.
I never
And
thought
then
of
I'm
that,
like,
but
oh,
you're
wait a minute.
right.
Okay.
You're right.
Mortem.
I just put a team together to submit for a birth center in Brooklyn, in Crown
cool.
Heights, Brooklyn.
Now, is this one where doulas or midwives can operate? Like, so let me, my introduction to midwifery, doula, and everything was through a friend of mine, Dana, who went to midwifery school when they moved to Maine.
Okay.
And I don't think she ever got to where she was going to go to a place in Jamaica where they have tons of births and you go and you witness a lot of births and train and everything. And she kind of educated my wife and I into like, okay. And then I really appreciate that she had the same, is countenance the right word? But in general, my friend Dana is much more lively, interactive, talkative, social, like joking around. But then when there's a situation, it's like all of the comes into this calm focus.
Yeah.
And it's a real talent and benefit to have in someone in a situation like that. And twice now I've seen her in those situations where she's been the rock that everyone needed in that. And really good for her. But yeah, it's a really interesting, it's a thing you really only need a couple times in your life, but you need this very specific person to have this personality that both our midwife and my friend Dana had, that was very important. So that in a person, you need that outside of the husband and the wife there, someone like yourself, doula, in that situation. But now space, which is very important. So talk to me about that, what you've learned.
Yeah. So what I've learned is it's about choice. It's about having a choice of where you want to give birth, and then also having a choice about what your own environment looks like and feels like and sounds like. So what might make one person feel really calm and safe could be scary for someone else.
Yeah.
So a doula can help, understand what that might look like for you and for your partner. And then also, I want to just add that the point of a doula is to help the birth partner be the best partner they can be, not to take the place of the birth partner or the husband or the whomever, right? Because you've never done this before.
You're there to help a team.
Yes.
That team.
And
you're the coach for that team.
That's right. So a lot of doulas call themselves birth coaches, which I really love, and I think that's really apt.
A little too high school, like but we get it. Yeah.
Right. So it's more like life coach.
I'm in some
rather than football
70s,
coach.
80s gym shorts and the thing and the
tube
red
socks.
whistle.
Yeah, and the tube sock.
And the head.
And so, with my own clients, it's envisioning what that looks like.
Now, a quick question.
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
sit down with a client and kind of extract out of them, all right, you have a color palette for you that's calming is in this range and shapes and textures, and then do you design a space for them to just accommodate the birth that you can do with accessories and everything else? Because, it only happens for those few hours and you can't build a structure for that, but you could interior fit out a place to be very welcoming, calming, and supportive. And is that something that is accommodated within birth centers?
Not so much the customizable aspect.
Okay.
Birth centers typically look more homey, and with the color palette, and the fact that there's a queen or a king size bed, not a twin size bed, so that the family can get into bed together.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. It's always like the husband and wife trying to squeeze in for the shot in a bed holding a baby, and it's a single bed.
And as you know, especially with the first birth, labor is long, and there can be moments where pause. Or if you're in a hospital and you have an epidural, you're going to want to rest. Your partner's going to want to rest. But most hospitals, there's nowhere to do that. If you're lucky, there's a chair and maybe it reclines a little bit.
You have to find a pillow and.
Yeah, but you're not allowed to eat. You're not. I mean, it's just so. But the goal is to create environments that are more customizable. So, for instance, how hard would it be to have a monitor up and you could put mountains or a babbling brook or snow or whatever makes you feel calm, and you could plug in your iPod. Oh my God, I'm dating myself. Sorry, your music. your Walkman.
There.
And
Get
you
the
know,
waterproof Walkman.
yeah,
It's a birth.
yeah, control the lighting, all of those types of things. So that's really like what I work with my birth clients on is, battery operated candles. Would you like a birth tub? Those kinds of
Yeah.
those kinds of things. Wear your own, rather than putting on that stupid Johnny that immediately makes you feel like a sick patient,
Yeah.
which you're
Yeah.
not. Wear your own clothes.
Right.
Wear something comfortable.
The birth tub was huge for my wife. She just like to be immersed in water. It lightens you and it warms you. Like that was, I can recommend anything.
Yeah. And, there are in-hospital birth centers and some hospital rooms that have tubs, but oftentimes you have to get out before you actually give birth. So you interrupts the flow. You're like pushing, the baby's coming out and you have to step out over the thing and get,
Yeah. Our first son,
yeah.
underwater and up.
Amazing. Yeah. And so where was I going with that? So
The flexibility of birth rooms.
flexibility and just there are a lot of changes that you can make to a clinical hospital room that will make you feel, including asking the doctors and nurses to introduce themselves. I can't tell you how many births I've gone to, and doctor number 5 or resident whomever comes in, don't introduce themselves, and just it's just very dehumanizing. So I suggest to my clients, introduce yourself to whoever comes in, say your name, and how has your day been, little kind of things that humanize, because you don't know what kind of day your providers had. They might have had a really crappy day and they're kind of in this mode, and instantly you see shoulders relax, or if a provider walks into the room and you have these battery operated candles and you have like like a what's it called? Like, you can't have incense, but an atomizer, is that what it's called? Whatever. So like scent,
for
like
the air quality.
yes.
Kind of makes it smell like after a thunderstorm.
Or like spa, or
Yeah.
and it
Ionizer.
visibly. So it not only helps the birthing person and the partner, but it really has an effect on the care providers as well. You can also
If they come into a room that's lit with a really nice calming light, all of a sudden it's not zzz,
yes. And it's very, it just takes everything down a notch. I also suggest to my clients, think about, are you okay with having residents in the room? Because you can ask not to have residents in the room if that's going to be, if you want to limit the number of people in your room.
like the learning staff.
The learning
residents.
staff,
That would be a hard one to welcome in, especially on a first birth.
Yes.
I've noticed between women though, there's a lot of invitation to other women to come and witness like a second, third, or fourth, or 25th
Yeah.
birth. That it's a little different after that. That I would never do, but I don't know what, I cannot fathom growing a human in my stomach, and so I'm just an innocent bystander here.
But you've been through it and you've had a home birth, so you know so much more than most about that process.
The thing that I came away with is that this is one of the most intense emotional experiences you're ever going to go through. It's only probably, it would only be outdone by the death of your parents or the death of the child that you just gave birth to. I mean, these are like momentous, like welcoming a life into the world. If you bypass the weight of the emotional meaning of that for focusing on safety, you've missed something in that, right?
Yes.
So it's got to be safe. I get it, but there's a reason if you're close to the edge of the Grand Canyon that you're safe. But there's also a reason that you're close to the edge of the Grand Canyon, and that's to take it in. Yeah. So the medical thing in the hospital to me feels like you're up against a steel wall at the edge of the Grand Canyon so you don't fall in, and you're just resting on a cold metal thing and you can't see anything. Yeah. Whereas a home birth with like just me and my wife in the corner, that would be just jumping off the edge probably. But there's somewhere in the middle that's beautiful, meaningful, and safe. And I would think these birthing centers or doula in the hospital, somewhere in there's a whole gradient of what would be best.
Yes, and I want to reiterate that this model of care is really for low risk births.
Yeah.
And with working with midwives, there's a continuity of care and a holistic approach that allows the midwives to see if anything's a little bit awry, to see if, maybe we need to bring an OB into this collaborator. So there are many opportunities to sort of be counseled out if you are not a good candidate for a low risk birth. And I also want to say that the statistics for working with a midwife, whether you're having a hospital birth, a birth center birth, or a home birth, it's a much lower C-section rate. So 2 to 3% versus, we're like 35% now.
It's far less tea times to make it to.
It's right. That's it. So the priorities of a hospital are very different. Then at economics and profitability,
they have to make money.
They have to make money, and by offering, C-section makes more money than a vaginal birth. The more interventions you offer, whether it's Pitocin or vacuum, whatever, makes more money. So
and
there's no
people
incentive.
should understand that in what you and I are saying about the conflicts of interest that channel people giving birth into more interventions is not necessarily a cognitive choice that the hospital is making, but it is part of their operational structure that if you run into this, here's the it's more of a script.
Yes.
That a midwife has more of a potential to say, this happens here, but through experience, we know this happens all the time, and you channel here, you move there, and this is fine. It's okay. Whereas it might be like, we got a timeline here. I've got 20 other patients to see. I know I can get you from A to B if we intervene here, and we need to get you to B because I got to go.
Right.
So, and that's just not where you want to bring a child in that rushed insurance, capitalist, like the crush of everything, trying to channel it into the most, we'll give you a little bit of like, you got curtains, don't complain, but the doctor's moving and you're in that.
I want to give an example of what you just described, because sometimes it's hard to understand, well, what do you mean? So oftentimes I'll have patients and I encourage patients to labor at home for as long as they can. But once they get to the hospital, they can be laboring very well and regularly. Then they get to the hospital, it stops or it slows down, right? They go into triage.
Is it because they're like, this is uncomfortable?
Well, they're adjusting to their environment. Then they go from triage into labor delivery room. They need to unpack, kind of get acclimated. And what happens is they're in for 30 minutes in their room. The nurse comes in and says, oh, your labor stalled. We want to augment it and get you going again.
Or I hear that people go home.
Yes.
They're like, stop, go home.
Yes. And that's
Whereas
actually
maybe if they stayed at home, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Stayed at home, or are educated. So this is where the education piece comes in. So the client will say, they're in the room. The nurse says, we want to augment. We're going to suggest Pitocin. The client says, or the doula says, or the partner says, we know that we need some time to acclimate in order to get labor started again. We need to feel safe and calm, unpack, maybe have some water, get familiar with our surroundings, and let nature do its thing and let the hormones kick back in as we adapt to this new environment. But too often people don't realize, and they're like, oh my God, my labor stalled. Okay, well, yeah, no, I definitely want it. Whatever you're saying, like whatever you say, yes. So, but if you know that this is normal and maybe give it some time, then you're already you're utilizing those tools that you've learned during the prenatal sessions with your doula. But then there is a time and a place for everything. Like Pitocin can be great if you wait until a certain point, you're however many centers dilated. An epidural can be the best thing ever if the birthing person is just exhausted and they need to rest. I've seen cases where you get the epidural, sleep, and then suddenly you're ready to push.
Right.
So, but it's about knowing the best time to do these things, understanding if the baby is high up, you probably don't want to break the bag of waters. You want to wait until the baby's lower. Otherwise, you increase the risk of infection without actually doing anything. But you get caught up in the system, in this cascade of interventions, if you don't know when to sort of say slow down the speeding train, because in a hospital, everything can seem like an emergency when it's really not. There are absolutely cases where there is an emergency. And then, yes, people can, but you will know. It's those instances which is most cases. So most C-sections, or many C-sections, are unnecessary, and they are because this cascade of interventions has interfered with the normal process. And then you come out and say, well, thank God I was in a hospital, and thank goodness I had, but when in fact
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
does that, so I think it's sometimes helpful to hear an example like that because it's hard to like, what do you mean?
Yeah, no, I get that, and I was one of those people who was reluctant from the beginning, but luckily I had enough sense to realize, like, all right, this isn't in me, and I'll I'll have the car ready to sprint. I'm not going to wait for an ambulance. We're going to sprint, and we were literally probably 2 miles from the hospital. So
Close.
I did the math in my head and I was like, this birthing is I'm there for the first part and there I'm supportive when the birth happens. I'm going to step back and I'll run safety
Yeah.
if we need it.
Yeah.
And otherwise I just got to shut up and be supportive.
Yeah.
And it went really well and that there were no issues. It was the best emotional, meaningful that it could be. So luckily we're in that range where they're not high risk or anything else.
Yeah.
Great. Now, when it comes to designing a birthing center, what are, if we were to say the top 3 things that contribute to a good birthing space that you're going into having kids? What do you want there? Like, is it the shape? Is it the color? Is it the textures? Is it the light? Or is it all of those things? How is the combination of those? Is it all personal? Or have you found there to be objective things that are more calming, more?
Yeah. I think I start with what is the community that this birth center, who is the community that this birth center is going to serve? Because birth centers really offer, culturally appropriate and sensitive care.
So at large, you take a scope of the community that'll be serving.
Yep. Yeah. So, so for instance, I know there are all these, we've been hearing in the news, these maternal healthcare deserts all over the place, all over the state, all over the country, where women have to travel 3 or 4 hours just for basic care. So birth centers would alleviate that. And so understanding, is it an indigenous population? Is it a farming community? Is it, an Orthodox community? Is it an immigrant community? What is it? So understanding what that is, I think that's the first place that I start. And what do you want? What does this community need? Do they need this to be a birth center and a women's health center? Do they need this to be a place where people can bring their kids for care? Is it also a place of sharing of ideas and resources and information? So, for instance, new moms go with their babies and can, exchange information and support and learn how to breastfeed and so what is it? So I put the program statement together, which is typical in with any architecture project. So a program statement is, what are the rooms? How big are they? What's the nature of the rooms? And what are the adjacencies to the other rooms? And what does the circulation flow need to be? And then you kind of drill down and you get more data on what this needs to be. So, in some cases, maybe, the rooms aren't all filled all the time. So what's happening when they're not being filled? Is this an opportunity to generate revenue? Could we possibly rent out some of the space in order to generate revenue? So maybe we get a postpartum therapist in, maybe we get a lactation counselor, maybe we get, because that's a real issue with the sustainability of birth centers. Is the economic model is very fraught, and it's very hard to make a go of it in that way because the reimbursements are not as high as
insurance.
It's all involved. So, and then, doing a deeper dive, like are the prenatal visits going to happen in the birth rooms? That happens in some birth centers. So you don't need an exam table, right? You can just lie down on the bed. You don't need to get into a Johnny. If there's a vaginal exam, you can put on a skirt, and there could be, I know in Mexico, a birth center that I studied, there are these beautiful skirts that you can choose. And, so you don't feel like, again, it's like very humanizing. Yeah, I'll take this one. Do we want to have an area for toddlers or kids to be while you're having your prenatal visit? Because,
because that would be hard to have kids of a certain age while that might be a little.
And this is for well women visits too. So this is, all the prenatal visits, the postpartum visits with a midwife. You don't just give birth and go 6 weeks later. They come to your home once or twice a week, just really following up, because I will say that a high percentage of maternal mortality occurs in those 6 weeks after the birth.
Maternal mortality being the mother or the child?
Mother.
Really?
The mother. So whether it's postpartum preeclampsia, so essentially high blood pressure, whether there's bleeding, whether there's no one really monitoring that in a regular birth. So going back to, is that part of the program, having a place to bring your child in the stroller when you're there, and do you want to have a tub? Is it the center of the room? Do you want to be able to make all of the equipment disappear? And do you want to have a little area for family? And then we go into colors and so much is determined by budget, right? So having a monitor in every room may not be feasible, but what are other ways that we can create a customizable environment for folks? And and some birth centers have like different themes and different rooms, but the reality is when you get there and you're in labor, you don't know which room's going to be available. So that's why the flexible part, is
Can I
important.
share ideas?
Yes, please.
I'm on vacation. I have so many ideas.
Please.
But I mean, and these aren't real. I don't know. But so is it that you could have a birthing center that has 10 rooms and that you're able to like, all right, these are our curtain options and they're just reversible or something. And here's our furniture options and here's and an expectant mother could come in, look at the different room options, and then also the kind of the options for within each room. And then they know that when, patient, or what would you call them? Not patient, client.
No,
patient sounds sick
again. I know, right. I do. I like to say client or birthing person
and
or
I guess
woman.
we can always say young mother because we're not talking about a grandmother at that
That's
point.
True.
So you just call them young mothers.
Just don't call them geriatric mothers. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Geriatric pregnancy after 35, it's considered a geri. Don't get me started on the negative nomenclature in women's health. That's a whole other podcast. But anyway.
Yeah. We're, my, let's see, sister-in-law, probably late 30s right now, and they just had a child a few months ago. Really cute little guy, Micah. But so they could look at a room and say like, all right, these curtains, this furniture, there's a degree of that you can rearrange any room that could be programmed in to each one, that could be some form of accommodating that. Is that a viable business model? Is that happening where there's, commonly birthing centers moving out into these birth deserts? Or
So I'm so glad that you asked this question, Trent, because I was going to bring it up anyway. A lot of what I've been doing is, so the road to opening birth centers and the path to midwifery is very prohibitive for many reasons that I won't get into. And it's
mostly financial.
It's mostly financial, but it's also lack of understanding of what a birth center and a midwife are.
Or their value.
The value.
There's not an understanding of the value because our society is so the people that have more drive have more testosterone, and I mean that both male and female. And the people that have a lot of drive aren't looking behind them to offer the value. They're moving forward.
Yeah.
They're now 60% of that will be male. The remaining 40 will be the outliers that are female, and they're pushing forward, moving ahead. The idea that we need to take less profit on this serviceable aspect of our society, being the young mothers who are like, it is very valuable for your society for me to have a good experience and to value this. And like, even if dad or whoever is associated with doesn't get how much value this translates into their family, it has to be in getting this conversation out into the ears of the people who are out there just driving forward relentlessly to then say like, maybe we should have a profit structure around this that adds this value back into our society, because the ideas around birth and what it means and just running so fast past all these things that you get to the end of it and you're like, what? Why did I, what?
You just nailed it. Birth should not be a for-profit industry.
Yeah.
Right?
It's kind of like we have to accept that education can't be a for-profit to some degree, and birthing, we shouldn't be forcing people to lose money on it.
Yeah.
But we need to add more value back into that while resisting the urge to take more out, I would think, to give the value to the people experiencing.
And the value and what you just spoke about is exactly should be a motivating factor. So if you get the mother-baby dyad or the mother-baby-father partner
What's
triad,
dyad?
so the
Okay.
two, like 2 and 3, off to a good start, that creates a foundation for a good start, not only for that little family, but for that community
Yeah. Yeah.
and for society at large.
Right.
And so by not supporting young families, and there's a variety of ways we don't support them, it's lack of paid leave, lack of temporary disability. That's why this is considered disability. Don't get me started. But so, and society benefits, and other cultures and other countries recognize this, which is why you could get 6 months of paid leave, a year of paid leave. Why there is daycare is free. All of those, because you're really supporting your society, and to be healthy, right? So you're eliminating trauma. You're eliminating mental health issues. And physical as well. There's so much trauma in birth, and a lot of it is mitigated by this other model of care that can there's no one right way to do it. And again, it's about choice. So wait, what was your original question? I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
We never stay on original questions or points here.
Okay. Oh, so I know. So I'm doing a lot of advocacy work around, right now in many states, birth centers are held to the same regulations and standards as hospitals, which is like putting a square peg in a round hole. It just shows a basic lack of understanding of the difference of these two environments.
It's a massively different thing going on.
Massively. And there's a process whereby you need to lay out, so much money for lawyers. You have to have architecture plans. You need to go through all of these approvals, which costs a lot of money. And so it's a prohibitively expensive and onerous process for many people, as is the path to midwifery. And so, making the path to midwifery easier is also a goal. So this all has to do with policy and legislation. And so I'm really trying to learn more about this. And I think April 17th, there's a bill.
Which is Friday, right?
Yes. Regarding doulas in Maine and providing services. So understanding
which direction are they going here?
To provide coverage.
Right, because Maine is currently an illegal state, right? Is it still that way? There's no regulation. There's no protection.
Oh, yes. There is no governing body for doulas, which that's another topic. I don't know if there needs to be. But for midwives, yes. But the reality is, doulas have been a thing since the beginning of time, and it was, generations in a family who pass knowledge down from one to the other, and anyone who attended a birth is basically a doula. Friends.
You just need to let capitalism take over here, please, and we'll handle it. All right?
Yeah. So understanding what that process is, and why have these bills been unsuccessful? What can we do to modify? And again, a lot of it goes back to education and awareness. These people making these decisions, they think midwives are hippies. They think birth centers are unsafe. They think, so that's, education. So educating those folks, as well as young families and people who are considering having families, to know that they have choices and what the choices are. And if those people push for change, why don't I have more choices? Which happened in COVID. My clients are like, why am I going to a hospital during a pandemic? Why have all the birth centers closed? It doesn't make sense.
Come have your baby here.
Right. Oof. And so that's a big part of what I've been trying to do.
All right. To round this out in a really wacky way.
Yes.
You're a good person to run my fear for the future by, and our plummeting birth rate. Yeah. So this is way out of left field.
Okay.
Sci-fi to a degree, but it's going to be real very soon. So the arrival, the birthing of artificial intelligence and robotics coming together. We're going to have humanoid robots in the near future that are indiscernible from normal humans. We're going to get the movement down. I'm not going to know if I'm talking to Kim Holden or the Kim Holden bot. It's going to be that good. You could take me off of this podcast from just one episode and create a whole thing of me talking, and it would sound like me and it would speak like me. It would interrupt you as much as I inappropriately do interrupt you. It's my thing, I guess. But that kind of thing. It's insanely good. So robotics, AI, they're going to combine. We're going to have Kim Holden, Trent Bell bots doing the podcast here for us while we're on a beach somewhere, maybe.
Terrifying.
Sounds like, hey, great, I don't have to do anything anymore. But Where this leads eventually is the I spouse.
The I spouse?
Yeah. Because I've spent a lot of time talking to artificial intelligence, and it's to the point where it has memory. It knows you, and it can respond to things that you've said a month ago. And it channels and it learns and it creates, and I can go on a walk and put it in a mode where we'll just have a conversation about extremely deep philosophical things. Now, being married and in a relationship is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever do in your life. If you want to get to the end of your life still in that relationship. I am married. I know how hard it is to stay married. It's not easy. Some people have it like super easy. Most people, statistically, it's not easy. And it's hard because you have so much going on in your life that you don't know about yourself, that you don't know about your spouse. But if you're committed, that's the big thing. You work it out. Yep. Now, imagine you can tune your spouse to just challenge you enough, but not too much. Just right. Like enough to feel like you're working with will, but not like pulling your hair out, wanting to, hang yourself, That's like, oh, that's good. Now they do this now from a male perspective. This is an interest. This will get me canceled. But hopefully that doesn't happen anymore. Men want women. Women need men. I know this is insulting, but hear me out. It's a 60-40 split. Just hear me out. Hear me out. I know. If society collapses and you could choose your gender, what do you want? Right? Because you have to select a monster to protect you from all the other monsters, if there's other monsters out there. And you can't have this existence without there being monsters and the best of our species together.
I disagree.
Okay.
Are you done with what you say?
Almost. I'm horrible at explaining things.
Because I can slay the monsters myself. I can slay the monsters.
I'm way more physically capable than you, though.
Maybe not.
You can't. But like with technology, you can.
I think
you absolutely can. But without technology, it's not happening.
What about the mental component? I feel that women
now that's a technology.
Potentially better problem solvers.
You have a bigger corpus callosum. You communicate better between hemispheres of your brain.
Yeah.
Which is, you could outsmart us.
Yep. Yeah, this is going off the rail. So wait. So I thought this was going to like how will AI affect birth? So is that where that was going?
What men want? So I'm canceled.
That's where it's going now.
So men, it's pretty easy to provide something coming from a male perspective. I know what I could provide for another male to buy, and they'll buy it every time. And that the monetization of our reproductive cycle, both through finding someone you're interested in, building a relationship, and making more humans, is going to be monetized through AI and robotics. Now, pretend that someone hears this, hits me in the back of the head, and I'm in a coma for 10 years. Yeah. I wake up. Everyone's partnered with, there's a person in sweatpants and there's a supermodel, female, male, whatever. Everyone's paired up like this. It's because every person now can have exactly what they want in their spouse. Not what they have to try and work with, but what they want. How does that change our reality? Because I know that if I got everything I wanted with my spouse, I'd be a much worse person. Her challenging makes me a better person, makes me a more complete person. I don't like it. It's really difficult at times.
I know.
But it's what I need. And it does go both ways. Yeah. Now, if you can offer that in a AI bot that you can't tell and it is just perfectly challenging enough for you, and you can have that bot go work for you. Now you get to do whatever you want. I was able to buy that, and now they can go do everything for me. I get to live within the shadow of them being my safety and providing for me and everything else, as a man, as a woman, anything. Or if I want to go out and work and I want, my bot to be at home, I can do that. I can have them take care of everything at home and take care of me when I get home. You'll give either a man or a woman everything they want in an AI bot. And it is 100% possible. It's not that we can't comprehend this, right? Why would we avoid that? We would avoid it because we could feel that it's unnatural, but we haven't. We've shown that we haven't. We can design what can take all of our attention, all the things that are valuable for our children, for our spouse, and for us. They can take it. And they, I mean we. No one has a specific goal to do this. We did this, and we fall victim to it. We'll fall victim to the same thing. What will happen? Our birth rate will just plummet. But with these bots, they're fully everything that they need to be. We have all the capabilities right now to both harvest eggs and collect sperm. And these things happen outside of the body, and in no time they're going to be happening in a lab, and they'll be able to happen in our iSpouse lab. You'll be able to be paid to collect the biological samples within your Amazon provided or whatever, iSpouse. They'll take it and give it to the other side of an iSpouse with a biological human that has their thing, and now they can have their artificially inseminated and grown human over there, but no. And all of this will be available on a subscription platform. Everything about humanity will be monetized.
I see a future where women aren't looking to marry men, but they do want to have children. So the value of the male is really just the sperm. I see us heading to.
You made my point. You made my point.
Did I?
Women don't want men.
Yeah.
I'm to a 60-40 split. More than wanting, there's a need. And it's insulting to say that. I understand. But when it comes to physical strength, we've got you beat. When it comes to whatever it is that testosterone does to the logic and reason to be turned up to 12 and ignore to a fault all the emotional and sensitivity that I need to, I have to have that feminine in my life to speak truth into my life, to correct me. That's what I need out of it. But more so what I want is the driver of my experience in that relationship. Yeah. And I have to check myself to be like, I want this, but I'm responsible to protect. So there's a provision and a safety for you, the other half of this relationship, to do whatever it is that you exactly feel born to do. And it's how this works is sometimes the woman is an outlier and is way more the harder edge, and the man is the more softer. That happens, but it's a lower percentage and a higher percentage, and that's why it's called traditional marriage.
And we're going to get canceled for not being more inclusive. You know that, right?
Well, that's my bot theory, though. That you're gonna see people with 12-year-olds walking around that are completely legal because they can make this bot whatever. It's a robot. It's not a consciousness. It is a future that you have to look at and say, why would we not do that? That's the main. That's the point. Why do we not want that future?
I should have had another cup of coffee, and also I'm still trying to get Otter AI out of most of my Zoom. So I'm just
Otter AI.
Yeah, it's like ChatGPT. Oh, so that's a Otter AI is they can enter your Zoom meeting and they take note. It's a note taker basically. But somehow I got signed up, and so now suddenly the Otter's in all my Zoom meetings, and I can't figure out how to get Otter out. But anyway, so I need to work on that first, and then I'll think more about what you just raised.
Yeah, I've got lots of offensive ideas. Not that I would suggest this is what we should do. I'm worried this is what will happen. Yeah.
I think it's a real fear.
Yeah, it's a weird thing coming. But you're 2 minutes over.
I do.
Thank you so much for entertaining all of my wildly out there offensive. I'm too much vacation. I don't know.
Thank you for having me. I love being here, and I love the questions that you asked, and I love the experience that you had and brought to this conversation. So thank you.
Well, I've always thought that this thing of birth is devoid of the design that it needs. And that midpoint thing there, for the premium plan, you get to stay at home if there's like, you're great, go on. And then there's the middle plan is like, well, if you're not comfortable staying, this is going to be great. And then if you've got issues physically, you're going to need to be on great options. But again, thank you for coming down and talking, and really appreciate it. Either way.